All right, take it away.
Hi. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is an important concept, and that's that we can use Active Directory to join not just Windows systems, but we can also use Active Directory to join Linux systems. So a few things that we first need to talk about, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Um, what actually is Active Directory? So right now I'm logging into my domain controller. I call it the Hydra DC. And one of the things that we have in here is we have these OU structures, right? But what actually is an OU and what is a forest? Well, that's LDAP. And with LDAP, you have this idea of authentication realms, which authentication can be performed against one or more systems or LDAP servers. And the way that's done in most cases is through Kerberos. And Kerberos has this concept of a realm that is a logical network similar to a domain that defines groups of systems under the KDC controller, right? And it has this concept of a ticket, and a ticket is the electronic information that identifies that user, right? So putting all that together, we can actually use a set of packages to join systems to Active Directory. So over here, I have my my Fedora system. It's called Light Cycle. I'm going to go ahead and log in as Tron. A couple things to note here. Active Directory requires domain name systems in order to work properly. So on a few systems, you actually need to disable the resolve.conf service, and you also need to unlink the etc resolve.conf. We have to do this because I haven't set up a true DNS server. So that's just a few things that have been done here, right? So if we go ahead and cat the etc resolve.conf, so what we've done is we've set the name server, which is the DNS that's being hosted by the Active Directory, right? So if we look at that over here, we can see that our system is running a DNS service, our Active Directory, and that's for the Hydra DC. And we've set the search for marvel.local, right? And so also to fix that, you need to be able to resolve that. But if you don't have that, you can set up your etc host file to point to your DC. And you need all of this to actually get everything to work, right? So the actual set of packages that I ended up installing is what you see up here at number 3. So realm D, SSD, odd job make directory, ADCLI, Samba common tools, and KRB workstation. So let's pause for a second and talk about the realm command. So realm D has 2 major tasks, and that involves around managing systems enrolled in a domain and setting which domain users are allowed to access system resources. And that ties into SSSD, which is the System Security Service daemon. And this allows you to manage resources that are being set up and configured when connecting to remote directory service and authentication mechanisms. Okay, cool. So how do we actually connect to all of this, Dave? Why don't you stop talking about it and show us? Got you. So first thing that we have to do is, now that we have everything set up, we have to issue a discover, right? We have to find out what information is there about our domain. So we issue sudo realm. So the realm D command has realm. If you need more information, you can always do man and then realm, and that will show you more. Realm discover. And then we'll do V for verbose, so you can see what's happening. Marvel.local. And then we give ourselves the password. Typically, realm D commands can only be issued by people in the wheel group or the suitorers group. Wheel is a concept that we see a lot in enterprise Linux. So there we go. So we conceive some of this. And the reason why is because we have DNS SRV records, which are like service records. And these are set up by default when you create a DC. And because those are in there in a forward lookup zone, we can actually pull the information back about who is the KDC and who provides the LDAP for us to access that directory. So with that, when we run the realm discover command, it'll also ask us, since we have some of those other tools like package kit installed, that will see if we need any other system packages required to join the domain. Since this is an out-of-box directory controller and it's 2019, some of those problems have been solved, so we don't need to install any of those. So what's going to happen is that we're going to now join the domain. And when we do that, SSD is going to call PAM, and it's going to set up some things for home directories for users when they log in, and set a couple other things up in order to manage it. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll do sudo realm, R-E-A-L-M, join marvel.local, L-O-C-A-L, tag V. And boom, so right there. So it's prompting us for our administrative password. And this is very important to think about. So when we are back over here on our DC, we know that there are certain users that have the ability, based on their membership in a group, to join systems to the domain. And most of that is in a domain admins group. So unless a user has inherited the permissions or they are in the domain users group, domain admins group, they're not going to be able to join to the domain, right? So I have a couple users, right? I have Frank Castle and Peter Parker. So F Castle and P Parker. F Castle and P Parker can't join those because they don't have the membership in the join, in a group that can join systems to the domain. So let's go ahead and enter the administrative password. And we get a big screen of text. Okay, so what just happened? So what's happened is the SSD has called things like oddjob to start making entries in the directory structure that set it up whenever somebody tries to log into the system. What we've also done is we've set up and we've generated Kerberos tickets. So now we're set up to actually do Kerberos logins that will allow us to use the single sign-on ability of Kerberos to use different services within Linux, right? So now a few more things that we need to do, right? We need to actually get some users to log into our system. But first, before we do that, let's verify that we have a computer actually joined to the domain. So we'll go over to the OU container and for computers, and we're going to go ahead and hit refresh, and boom. So we see light cycle has now showed up. And if we click on properties, we can actually see that the operating system says it's Red Hat Linux GNU. This is because Fedora is the upstream version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Great. So now that we've seen that, let's actually get a user to log into the system that is a member of the domain through SSH. So we're going to head and do that. So we'll do sudo realm permit F Castle at marvel.local. Cool. And now F Castle should be in there. So how do we verify that, Dave? Like you're telling us that it's in there, but how do I actually know that I have a user that can actually log into my system? So if we do ID at this point, we can get the AD user info of that user F Castle. I actually have to spell it. That's important. ID F CASTL. P Parker. at marvel.local. There we go. So we see, so one of the things that I just messed up there, and probably rightly so, when we say ID, just a user, that's a local user. When we say ID, user like fcastle at marvel.local, that actually specifies the authentication realm that we want to run the ID command against. So in this case, we're querying the AD directory itself, and we're able to find that. A few other things that we could dig into if we had the time is actually what's going on in the SSD config, because modifying SSD config can actually help us when we start pushing out root policy objects from our Active Directory controller to our Linux systems. But without further ado, let's actually get to the real thing, which is connecting through SSH. So, right, I've permitted fcastle to log in. So I can go ahead and see that that's there. But let's actually, let's do a different test, because that might actually be a little better. So I'll do SSH, configure SSH, and okay, boom. So right here. So we're going to go ahead and set up fcastle at marvel.local, and we're going to go ahead and ask it to connect. And we're going to go ahead and log in. And great. So now fcastle has logged in. If we do print working directory, we can see that his home directory is actually home fcastle marvel.local. If we actually go back here, we can see, we can do a who tac a to see who is logged in. And now we can see that fcastle is actually logged in from the IP address of the, so this would be my VMware switch, because this is a host-only network. So fcastle has logged in remotely. We could even go so far as to jump over here to our Windows 10 machine, and we could actually try to log in using SSH, but P. Parker doesn't have the ability to access a command prompt with administrative privileges. So we'll do PowerShell, and we'll open that up just to show that I have no tricks up my sleeve about being able to use SSH in the VMware workstation. Let's actually try it. So we'll do SSH fcastle. Hopefully I spelled this correctly. CASTEL at 192.168.253.133.
Is the L supposed to be before the E?
Huh?
Is the L the spelling? Is the L supposed to be before the E?
Yeah, it might be.
But anyway, the point was SSH, and yeah, the SSH wasn't there, so it's fine.
Yeah, but oh, actually, this one probably has it because it's newer. So SSH, yes, SSH, F S Castle at
again. Is the L supposed to be before the E?
Yeah, you're probably right.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, actually, never mind. Just do the way you have it, because I think, yeah, you're just consistent. I think you're right.
And then 192.168.253.133. And then we say yes. And then let's give him his password. And host name is Lightcycle. Cool. So Fedora has now joined, but that's great. So now we also want to leave the Active Directory, right? We're done. So we can do a sudo realm leave. And there, now that we've left the domain, one of the things that you do not have out of the box is the ability to actively remove objects out of Active Directory. Typically, when you do that, it sends some backend work that will actually remove the object out of the LDAP structure. So you have to manually remove it. So life cycle is now gone. If we try to log in as fcastle, we're not able to, because fcastle is not part of the domain, is not a user that is available on that remote system. But if we went SSH Tron at 192.168.253, and for the audience, this is the IP address of the light cycle system, and we logged in as Tron, we can now log in as Tron. So that is kind of it in terms of what I wanted to show with Linux and Active Directory. Obviously, there's a whole lot more to dig into here to actually get this all set up in a particular way. But this is one of the benefits of Red Hat-based systems, is they are designed out of the box to work with something called IPA or ID management. So there's a lot of packages and backend systems that are already set up in there. In fact, when you're installing Fedora, you actually have the option to choose an enterprise login at the install screen, and Red Hat is very much the same way. So with that, I'll open it up. If anybody has any questions or wants to see anything, please let me know. But with that, Candy, I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah, quick question before we can end this, Dave. So fcastle was a LDAP user, correct? And
Correct.
Tron is a user just on that red light cycle box, correct?
Right. So
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, yeah,
if we run get ent, and probably I should have showed that, pass wd, right? So when we are joined to the domain, fcastle shows up in here.
Gotcha.
Right?
Interesting.
So like if I went back and I actually did like this and I joined the system again, right? And I get all of that, and then I go ahead and I permit fcastle, and I do a get ent pass wd. I don't see fcastle in here yet, but if I went ahead and I did a SSH, right, and then I ran get ent pass wd, I don't see fcastle in here because pamd is not set up properly in order to actually resolve those, nor do I actually want that to be a record on the local system. It's better in that case to actually keep it on the AD.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, fcastle is not a local guy on this system.
Very cool. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.